Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the Supremely Enlightened One. Dear meritorious devotees, we are learning the Ariyapariyesana Sutta. This sutta is in Majjhima Nikaya. In our previous sessions, the 2 sessions that we had, we learned how Venerable Ananda invited the Buddha to Dhammika Brahmin's monastery, and the Buddha visited that place, and there were a set of bhikkhus over there, and they were having a discussion, and the Buddha did not disturb that discussion. He was staying outside until the discussion was over, and then he knocked on the door and went inside. And there we can remember him saying, there are 2 things that we should practice when we are together, when we have assembled. First is that we have to practice Dhamma talk. That means we have to talk Dhamma. The other is that we have to practice noble silence. In Dhamma, when we read Dhamma, we understand that noble silence is the second jhana. But nowadays we can't achieve these jhanas. It is extremely difficult to achieve these jhanas. But what we can do is that whatever meditation we are practicing, we can practice that in silence without disturbing the others. Without disturbing the others, we can practice. At least we can. It doesn't matter if we can't meditate. We can read a book. So we learned from that incident that we should not disturb a person who is reading the Dhamma or listening to Dhamma. We just have to give him that time to read that Dhamma, because that is the time that the Buddha is present. That is the time the Buddha is speaking to him. Even though he is not alive, we can remember the Buddha said, Yo Dhammam, Yo Bhikkhave Dhammam Passati Somam Passati. The person who sees Dhamma sees the Buddha. So we just have to give him that time when he's reading. So we learned nice points in the previous 2 sessions that we had. Now coming back to the sutta, so Buddha we can remember the Buddha went and met Ariyapariyesana first, and Ariyapariyesana was a person who achieved Akinchanyayatana, the concentration Akinchanyayatana, and it leads to a birth in another place, another world called Akinchanyayatana world. And the Buddha got to know that his mind was placed in that world even after achieving that state of concentration. Then he left that place and joined Uddakarama. And Uddakarama was a person who had achieved Neva Sanya, Na Sanyayatana, again another state of concentration. What happens is that if we die without having that Neva Sanya, Na Sanyayatana concentration, we are born in that world. So the Buddha got to know that there is a rebirth over there. So when we are born again and again, we face suffering, we experience suffering. So the Buddha left that place and went in search for the truth again. So this is the quest of greatness. This is the account of the quest of greatness, the story how the Buddha to be went in search for the Four Noble Truths. So once, then he said to those bhikkhus who were there in the Brahmika Brahmins monastery, "Dear bhikkhus, again I started searching for wholesome things. I became a person who is in search of Nibbana. Then I came, walking alone, I came to the kingdom of Magadha. That is the time I came to the village named Senani in Uruvela. I stopped over there. It is one of the beautiful places that I had ever seen. The forest is so beautiful, with the banks of its rivers, the river banks with its great white sand was really beautiful, he said. Then he said there was a village nearby. I could go on my arms round as well. So, dear bhikkhus, I thought this thought came into my mind. This place is such a nice place. The forest is so beautiful. The river banks with their white sand, the rivers, they flow beautifully, and there is a village nearby as well. This is a nice place for a person who wants to strive forth. That means to put an effort to understand the Dhamma, the truth. So, dear bhikkhus, I stayed there, and I decided that was the place to meditate, and I just sat down. Dear bhikkhus, being a person who is subject to birth, and by seeing the dangers of being subject to birth, I went on search for the Nibbana, where there is no birth. Now that means as a Buddha, now I have achieved that Nibbana, where there is no rebirth, where there is no birth. Being a person who was subject to old age, by seeing the dangers of old age, I went in search for the Nibbana, the deathless state, and I achieved that deathless state, that Nibbana, where there is no suffering. Being a person who was subject to sickness, I saw the dangers of being subject to sickness, and I went in search for the deathless state of Nibbana, where there is no suffering, and I achieved it. Being a person who is subject to death, was subject to death, I went in search for the Nibbana, where there is no death, and I achieved it. Now the Buddha says, being a person who is subject to sorrow, I saw the dangers of being subject to sorrow, and went in search for the Nibbana where there is no suffering, and I achieved it. Being a person who is subject to be defiled, I went in search for the Nibbana where there is no defilements, and I achieved it. He said. And he said this, Akuppa me cheto vimutti, ayamanti, the liberation I have is unshakable. The liberation I have is unshakable. It cannot be changed. Ayamanti majanti, this is my final birth. Natti dani punabhavati, there is no rebirth for me, he said. Then he said, the wisdom, now this is an understanding. This is an understanding. It is a wisdom. He said that this wisdom arose in him. That means that there is no rebirth again. Dear bhikkhus, I thought about it like this. The Dhamma that I have understood is so profound, it is not easy to be understood. It is subtle, pleasant. It is not something that can be reasoned and understood. Only wise can understand it. But this world, the beings in this world, they live in lust. They're attached to sensual desires. They're happy with lust. So, for people who are in lust, living in lust, who are attached to lust, who are happy with lust, if I go and teach them the dependent origination, it is not something that is going to be easy for them to understand. So this Nibbana is something that has no craving. So it is people who are attached to craving, live with craving. For them, it is not easy to understand this Nibbana where there is no craving, he thought. The Buddha thought that it's not going to be easy for these people to understand this Dhamma that he has achieved. Then he said, Dear bhikkhus, this thought in verses came into my mind. I had never heard about these. I have never heard these stanzas or verses before, he said. With so much of effort, I understood this Dhamma. And if I tell this Dhamma to others, it would be in vain. These people, they are indulged in lust, hatred. So for them, this Dhamma, to understand this Dhamma, it is not easy for them to understand this Dhamma. This is something subtle, profound. This is something that goes upstream, hard to understand, very subtle. For these people who live in ignorance, for these beings, they would not understand this Dhamma, he thought. So, dear bhikkhus, when I was thinking like that, I was getting reluctant to preach Dhamma. That is the moment, dear bhikkhus, Brahma Sahampati got to know what I thought, then he thought this. Alas, the world will perish. The world will perish. The beings in this world will perish. The supremely enlightened one is becoming reluctant to preach this Dhamma. Then, in a split of a second, he disappeared from that Brahma world and appeared in front of the Buddha. And he went down on his knees and he said, Bhante, please do preach Dhamma. Please do preach Dhamma. There are people with less amount of defilements, and if they don't get the chance to hear this Dhamma, they will not be able to develop themselves. But if they would hear Dhamma, they would understand, he said. So, dear bhikkhus, Brahma Sahampati said that, and in stanzas, in verses, he said this. Earlier on in the kingdom of Magadha, people with defilements preached a defiled Dhamma, a doctrine. It is present till now. Now, please do open the doors for Nibbana. Those who are with wisdom, they would understand the Buddha's Dhamma. Please do look at these people just as a person who is in top of a mountain. And please do preach his Dhamma, he said. So he kept on pleading, inviting the Buddha to preach this Dhamma. So the Buddha said, Dear bhikkhus, I understood what the Brahma was trying to say. And I felt, and look at this, the Buddha says, and I felt a compassion towards all beings. And from my eyes, I saw the world. When I saw the world, I saw these beings, some of them with less amount of defilements, some are with a lot of defilements, some of them having fine faculties like faith. Some of them lack that competency. Some people are good and some are bad. Some are easy to teach. Some are not that easy to teach. Some people, they believe in next world. Some people, they don't believe the next birth. And they are not afraid of unwholesome deeds. So the Buddha said, dear devotees, the Buddha said that he saw the world like a lotus pond where there are certain lotuses beneath the surface of the water, but some of them have come out, the surface of the water. And so Buddha saw, in the same way the Buddha saw this world. He said, when a lotus it has come out of the surface of the water, when the sun shines, it blossoms. Just like that, for those who are with less amount of defilements, are like the lotuses out of water or above the surface of the water. When the sun shines, that means when the Buddha preaches the Dhamma, they understand it. They understand it quickly. So, Buddha saw the world like a lotus pond. Then he said, I'm going to open the door for the deathless state that is called Nibbana for those who are wise. If someone wants to listen to this Dhamma, he may have faith in this Dhamma. Dear Brahma, this Dhamma that is pleasant, I didn't teach it because I thought it was going to be wearisome and troublesome for me. So, the Buddha says here, dear bhikkhus, Brahma Sahampati thought like this. He thought, I convinced him. Now the Brahma Sahampati thought that he had convinced him, and he venerated the Buddha and disappeared, and he appeared back in the Brahma world. Then the Buddha thought like this. Then the Buddha thought, he says, dear bhikkhus, then I thought, who am I supposed to teach Dhamma first? Who would understand it quickly? At that time, I thought like this. Ariyapariyesana is wise. He's been living with less amount of defilements for a long time. I think I should go and preach him Dhamma first. He would understand it quickly, he thought. Dear bhikkhus, at that moment, divine beings came to me and told me, Bhante, 7 days ago, Ariyapariyesana died. The Buddha says, even I understood that 7 days ago, Ariyapariyesana died. Dear, because then I thought of him like this. Ariyapariyesana is an unlucky person. If he had heard this Dhamma, he would have understood it quickly. Then I thought like this, dear bhikkhus, to whom I should preach this Dhamma now for the first time. Then, dear bhikkhus, I thought Ramaputta Uddaka is wise. He's been with less amount of defilements for a long time. I think I should go and preach him Dhamma. Dear bhikkhus, at that moment, divine beings came to me and told me, Bhante, last night Ramaputta Uddaka died. Dear bhikkhus, even I got to know that means the Buddha, from his wisdom, from his psychic powers, he saw that Ramaputta Uddaka died the day before. Then, dear bhikkhus, I felt this, alas, Ramaputta Uddaka is such an unlucky person. If he had heard this Dhamma, he would have understood it quickly. Dear bhikkhus, then I thought, who am I supposed to preach this Dhamma first? Who would understand it quickly? Then I thought of Panchavagyanam Bhikkhunam, the set of 5 bhikkhus. They were in service to me when I was meditating. I think I should go and teach them this Dhamma first. Then, dear bhikkhus, surpassing the human capacity from my divine eye, I saw that they were in the Varanasi, in Isipatana. Dear bhikkhus, I stayed in Uruvela as long as I wanted, and I went towards Varanasi. Dear bhikkhus, I came across a man named Upaka, a recluse named Upaka. I was there in the middle of Gaya and the place where I got enlightened. So he saw me and he asked me this question. Now this is Upaka speaking to the Buddha. He says, dear friend, your complexion is pure. You're glowing. Under whose doctrine have you gone forth? Who's your teacher? Whose Dhamma, whose teachings do you prefer? He asked. Then bhikkhus, to that Upaka, the recluse Upaka, in stanzas, I gave him this answer. I eradicated all defilements. I'm a person who has understood everything. I'm a person who is not attached to anything. I've given up all unwholesome things, all defilements. I have eradicated craving, and I have achieved liberation. From my own wisdom, developed wisdom, I got to know everything. Who am I supposed to point at as a teacher? I have no teacher, and there is no one equal to me. In this world with its devas, there is no person equal to me. I'm an arhat. I am the incomparable leader. I am a fully enlightened one. I am a person who has extinguished his fires, quenched and extinguished. I'm on my way to the city of Kasi to turn the wheel of Dhamma, to beat the drum of deathlessness, to this world, the world full of ignorance. So then the Upaka says, dear friend, do you mean to say you're a person who has won to the infinite? Are you a universal victor? He asked. Then the Buddha said, yes. I have eradicated all asavas and achieved the deathless state of Nibbana. For those people who have achieved the deathless state of Nibbana by eradicating all the asavas, it is correct to say, or call him, Jina. I defeated all unwholesome things. I defeated bad deeds. So, Upaka, it's proper to call me with the word Jina. So the Buddha said, dear bhikkhus, I told this to the recluse Upaka. Then he nodded his head and he said, it can be possible. He just nodded his head, saying it could be possible, and he went his way. So, dear bhikkhus, from Varanasi, I came to Isipatana, where the bhikkhus of the group of 5 were residing, and they saw me at a distance, and they had this discussion. Friends, look, the recluse Gautama is coming this way. He's a person with 4 requisites now. He's reverted his meditation. We should not go and venerate him. We should not worship him. We should not be in service to him. We should not go and take his robes in bowl. We just will arrange a seat for him. We'll just arrange a seat for him. So if he wants to, he would come and sit down. But dear bhikkhus, when I came closer to them, they could not stay the way they were, the way they discussed. One came and took my robe. The other one came and took my robe and the bow. The other went and arranged a seat, and another went and arranged water to wash my feet. But they addressed me as friend. They called me friend. Because then to the bhikkhus of the group of 5, I told them this. Dear bhikkhus, to Tathagata it is not proper to address using the word friend. Don't call me friend, he said. Tathagata is a fully enlightened one, an arahant. So bhikkhus, please do listen to me. I have found the deathless state. I will teach you Dhamma. And if someone adheres to the Dhamma I preach, he would understand that supreme bliss of Nibbana in this very life, he said. So now here the Buddha says, dear bhikkhus, but they said to me in return, dear friend Gautama, you gave up those austerities. They were so hard. And by giving up those austerities, do you mean to say you have achieved? By even when you were doing austerities, you could not understand at least something beyond the human capacity. Now you're with 4 requisites. Do you mean to say that you have achieved Nibbana? Then the Buddha said, no, dear bhikkhus, Tathagata is not a person who has developed himself, developed with the 4 requisites, and I have not reverted my meditation. I am an arahant, a fully enlightened one. Dear bhikkhus, please do listen to me carefully. I have found the deathless state. I will teach you. I will preach you Dhamma. And if someone adheres to the Dhamma that I preach, he would understand this supreme bliss of Nibbana in this very life, he said. So for the second time and for the third time, the same kind of conversation went. And for the third time, they refused to accept that the Buddha had achieved the Nibbana. Then the Buddha asked these bhikkhus, because have I ever told you such a thing, that I have achieved Nibbana? Then they said, Bhante, you have not. So they used the word Bhante at this time. This is the point, the time that they used the word Bhante. Earlier they used the word friend and addressed the Buddha. But here the Buddha managed to convince them that he had understood the Dhamma. So it was successful. So because of that, they addressed him saying Bhante. They used the word Bhante. Then the Buddha preached the Dhamma that he understood to these bhikkhus. When 3 were on their way on their alms round, he taught the Dhamma to 2. And when the 3 came in, he gathered that 3 and preached Dhamma to that 3. So the Buddha preached Dhamma to these 5 bhikkhus. Then the Buddha says, Dear bhikkhus, now he's addressing the bhikkhus who were there at the Ramika Brahmins monastery. Dear bhikkhus, for those bhikkhus of the group of 5, I taught Dhamma. So they were subject to birth, they were subject to old age, they were subject to death, they were subject to sickness, they were subject to sorrow, they were subject to be defiled. But by listening to Dhamma, by understanding this Dhamma, finally they achieved the supreme bliss of Nibbana. And they too had this knowledge. Ayamantima jati natidani punabhoti. That means akupa me cheto emukti. That means the liberation that they have achieved became unshakable. And they understood that this is their final birth. And natidani punabhoti means there would be no more birth again. So it is a wisdom. So the Buddha says, there is a Dhamma point now. He gives this Dhamma point to the bhikkhus who were there inside the Ramika Brahmins monastery. Dear bhikkhus, there are 5 sensual pleasures. What are they? Pleasant forms, that means things that we see. Pleasant sounds we hear. Pleasant tastes, pleasant smells that we smell, pleasant tastes that we taste, and pleasant feelings that we feel. These are the 5 sensual pleasures, he said. So if someone, without seeing the dangers of these 5 sensual pleasures, if someone keeps on, become addicted to these things, these 5, then the Buddha said, those who are addicted to these 5 sensual pleasures should be identified as people who have become into perish, who have come into a state where Mara could do anything to them. So he gives a simile. Because it is something like this. Imagine there is a deer, a forest deer. Now, he's been snared. He's been trapped. He's been trapped. So he just what it does is that it just stays where it is, without moving, without trying to escape. So the Buddha says, now, for the hunter, it is easy for him to go and do anything that he prefers. Just like that, when people are indulged in sensual pleasures, when they're addicted to these sensual pleasures with distorted minds, he said the Mara gets a chance to do whatever he wants to these people who are indulged in these sensual pleasures, who are addicted to these sensual pleasures with distorted minds. But the Buddha said, dear bhikkhus, there can be a recluse, a Brahmin, who is not addicted to these sensual pleasures, 5 sensual pleasures, and they see the danger of these sensual pleasures. So they would not come into danger, they would not meet danger. And the Mara would not get a chance to do anything to these people, he said. Dear, because it is something like this. Imagine there is a forest deer. Now, he's not been snared, trapped, but he's just lying down, sleeping. So, since he's not in a trap, he's not being snared, when he wakes up, he can run wherever he wants. Just like that. So the hunter would not be able to do anything to that forest deer. So he said something like that. The simile. Now, the thing that we have to understand here is that if we are not attached to these 5 sensual pleasures, that means the Mara doesn't get a chance to do anything to us. So that's the message that the Buddha wants us to understand here. Then the Buddha said, dear bhikkhus, there is a forest deer. Now, this deer, without any fear, he walks alone in the forest, stays in the forest, and sleeps in the forest. See, this deer, it doesn't have any fear. What's the reason for this? Because he didn't meet the hunter. Just like that, dear bhikkhus, if someone can achieve the first jhana, he will be in a state where the Mara would not get a chance to do anything to him. And further, the Buddha explains, if a bhikkhu achieves the second jhana, then he is in a state where the Mara would not be able to do anything to him. And if the bhikkhu achieves the third jhana, the fourth jhana, and he goes on like this up to akasananchayatana, all the concentration, the states of concentration, he says that it is not possible for the Mara to do anything for those the bhikkhus who have the first jhana, the second jhana, the third jhana, the fourth jhana, and akasananchayatana, the concentration akasananchayatana, and the concentration of vijnananchayatana, the concentration of nevasanyana. And for the bhikkhu who achieves nirodha samapatti, another concentration, the state of mind, all these states of mind, concentrations, if the bhikkhu is in one of these, the Buddha said it is not possible for the Mara to do anything for that bhikkhu. Then the Buddha said, so he who achieves these jhanas will eradicate all asavas as well. So, dear bhikkhus, it is to this bhikkhu that we say the person who has blindfolded Mara, who is in a place where there is no sight of Mara. He who has escaped to a place where there is no Mara. So he who has escaped craving, which is called visattika, that bhikkhu, dear bhikkhus, will walk without fear, stay without fear, sit without fear, will sleep without fear. What is the reason for that? Dear bhikkhus, the reason is that he did not meet with Mara. So the Buddha delivered this discourse. The name of the discourse is Ariyapariyesana Sutta. The bhikkhus who heard this Dhamma sermon by the Buddha became delighted and accepted this sutta with praises of sadhu. With delight they accepted. So, dear meritorious devotees, we're so lucky to have heard this Ariyapariyesana Sutta today, because this is such a rare opportunity that we get to listen to these sermons or these suttas that the Buddha had taught many hundreds and thousands of years ago. So by the merit that we have gained today by listening to this Dhamma sermon, we wish all of you would attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana in this Gautam Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.